Hello, everyone. Good morning. I am Dr. Abigail L. Laganao, the chair of Session 1 of Ako Para sa Bata, and I am happy to be your host for today. The Child Protection Network Foundation is celebrating the 15th year of the Ako Para sa Bata, I Am for the Child Conference, a continuing education for individuals and professionals in the front line of child protection work. So, to give us an overview of the Ako Para sa Bata conference and present the objectives, let us all welcome one of the scientific committee chairs, Dr. Maria Emma A. Lianto.
Thank you for that introduction. And good morning, maayong buntag, maupay na buntag, magandang umaga po sa lahat. Mental health is essential. It's an essential part of health, we know that. And according to WHO, there is no health without mental health. And the pandemic made this very clear as we saw record numbers of young people consulting for anxiety, depression, and even suicide attempts. We now realize that mental health and well-being enable people to realize their full potential, to be able to cope with the daily stresses of life, to work productively and contribute to their communities. So mental health is fundamental to enjoying life. For this reason, the promotion, protection, and restoration of mental health can be seen as a vital concern of individuals, communities, and societies. So it's everybody's business. We all need to start and continue the conversation on mental health. So we chose Usapang Lusog Isip as the theme for the 15th Ako Para sa Bata conference. And the objectives of this conference are to answer the following questions. First, how's the mental health of Filipino children and adolescents? What's its status right now? What's the latest data? Next, what's the impact of adverse childhood experiences or ACEs and other traumas such as exposure to war? What's the impact of stigma and discrimination on mental health, especially on accessing the services? Next, how can we recognize the signs of PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, and suicide? And how are common mental health conditions managed? What are the services and the resources available right now? And what are the gaps that we experience in terms of the services? And finally, how can health service providers and all of us take care of our own mental health? How can we manage stress, avoid burnout, and compassion fatigue? The scientific committee made it a point to end each session with a simple self-care practice that we hope you will learn, practice, and also teach your clients and your own family. Okay, we invited top experts in the fields of medicine, psychology, psychiatry, education, social work, research, and young people to provide their views and their recommendations. So don't miss any of the sessions. Be part of this very important conversation, Usapang Lusog Isip, and be part of the solution. Thank you and enjoy the program.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emma. I look forward to all the Ako Para sa Bata 2023 sessions. So for the session 1, I'd like to just give a shout out to my co-chair, Miss Anna Lindo, who helped us prepare today's session. This session will open the series of lectures for Ako Para sa Bata. The first lecture will discuss the developing brain and the factors affecting its processes. The changes in the developing brain impacts the child's mental health, and understanding the intricacies of its evolution will pave the way to establishing the connections that makes or breaks youth's mental health. The second lecture will discuss the current state of mental health of the Filipino youth, including the statistics of common mental illnesses, scope and impact of the problem, An overview of factors affecting youth mental health using the biopsychosocial-spiritual model will also be presented. And lastly, the third lecture will discuss the current mental health services available to the Filipino youth and the government programs, including the implementation of the mental health law in the national level down to the barangay level. The factors affecting help-seeking behaviors such as barriers and stigma will be presented also in this lecture. And the same lecture will present current practices and suggestions to improve the mental health services of the Filipino youth. So the learning outcomes were presented earlier. Can we go back to the previous slide? It is to create awareness of the current state of the mental health of the Filipino youth, learn about the biopsychosocial spiritual model, common mental illnesses, understand the barriers to the mental health services, and know the current available mental health services in the country. So our first resource person is none other than Dr. Cornelio Banaag Jr., a professor emeritus of the University of the Philippines College of Medicine. He has received the International Contribution Award for Outstanding Contribution in Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Mental Health in 2022. He has also received a Lifetime Distinguished Award in 2016, the Most Outstanding Psychiatrist Award in 2007, and the Outstanding Educator Award in 2005. We are proud to have him open this year's Ako Para sa Bata sessions. So let us all give a warm welcome to Dr. Cornelio G. Banaag Jr. Hi, sir.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Abigail. We're starting with some understanding of the developing brain. And just as well that to start this way, because everything starts with our brain. Now, this is the outline. We'll understand the brain. Now, the brain is a very complex organ that orchestrates our complex behavioral repertoire. Just about anything we do is coordinated with the brain. The brain controls thought, memory, emotion, touch, motor skills, vision, breathing, temperature, hunger, just about every process that regulates our body. And for all these activities, the brain relies on certain chemical substances we call neurotransmitters and electrical signaling. I think we're familiar with some of these terms. I think some of us know things like serotonin, dopamine. These are the neurotransmitters. How does the brain work? The brain is a very unique organ of the body. You know, our body consists of so many organs, but if our body were an orchestra, it is the brain that is the conductor. We have billions of cells in our brain called neurons, and yet the brain is the only organ of the body where no two cells connect. There is a space between two cells that we call the synaptic cleft. This is the gap where communication among neurons take place. A neuron will be sending a signal by releasing a chemical substance called neurotransmitter and send this to the next cell that receives it. We call it the receiving cell, presynaptic, postsynaptic cell. This postsynaptic cell may in fact branch to communicate with several other neurons. Its human experience forms a neural connection in the brain. Every experience we have, from infancy through adulthood to the last moment of our lives, they send communication to the brain. Every connection or communication forms this synapse, this communication between two cells. And these synapses form a network which then influence everything, whether it's a child's intellectual capacity, problem-solving ability, understanding of language. When a mother looks at the child, who smiles and tries to reach out to the face of the mother, and the child coos and laughs and smiles or cries, and the mother responds appropriately. Something very important is happening in the brain. The network is getting developed, you know. This is what we call wiring of the brain is all about. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections involving emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, language, and this with the repeated experience and use of these connections, these circuits become more efficient and will connect rapidly in different brain areas. Mhm. There is what we call a serve and return relationship between the child and the parents. The child smiles and the mother is driven with so much happiness and they can converse, you know. Yeah, it's like the child sends a signal and the mother understands the signal and is able to appropriately respond. This is the beginning of a bonding on the part of the mother and an attachment on the part of the young baby. Young children naturally reach out for interaction through their bubbling facial expressions, gestures, and the adult response accordingly. In the absence of such responses, or if the response are unreliable or inappropriate, the brain's architecture does not form as expected, which can lead to problems in learning and behavior. What is an example of an inappropriate response? The baby may be feeling hungry and crying, and the mommy is very impatient and busy and gives the baby a little whack on the bottom. That's an inappropriate. Or screams at the baby and says, tama nang kaiyak, nagmamadali na si mommy, you know. The mother just cannot get the message of the baby, the signal of the baby, and responds inappropriately. That can be a toxic experience for the baby, and the brain is getting wired along those lines. Like I said, there's the cognitive, emotional, and social capacities. These three functions of the human mind are inextricably intertwined throughout our life. Emotional well-being, social competence provides a strong foundation for our emerging cognitive abilities. The emotional and physical health, social skills, cognitive language capacities that emerge in the early years are important prerequisites for success in school and later in the workplace and the community. Now, let's talk about stress. Stress cannot be avoided. It's part of life. But there is a positive stress and there is a toxic stress. Positive stress, these are moderate, short-lived, bodily response to uncomfortable experience. This is important and a necessary aspect of development. The baby is crying, the mommy is fixing the bottle, and the mommy says, hasabay, baby, sandali na lang, and the baby stops crying because he or she hears the familiar sound of the mother. The wiring of the brain is happening. Toxic stress, on the other hand, is strong, unrelieved activation of the body's stress management system. There is constant stress, like the baby could cry black and blue and the mother just ignores or even gives a whack. In the absence of a buffering protection of adult support, toxic stress becomes built into the body by processes that shape the architecture of the human brain. Take a look at this. The left side shows a healthy brain where the response, the give and take between the mother and the baby, the caregiver and the baby is happening appropriately and healthily, and we see an intact brain. However, on the right side is the result of toxic experience of the baby. This toxic experience, later on, you can see the damage created in the brain, and this can have long-lasting negative impact the memory and learning, and can manifest itself later on in life as depression, anxiety. Toxic stress may have a reduced ability to gain an education. It can affect even the learning capacity and the socialization of the child. Toxic stress is what we often deal with in our CPUs, in our child protection units. That's why I congratulate our Child Protection Network for this continuing work, the message of good will for parents, how to take care of babies to avoid toxic stress. Now, what are the factors that affect brain development? There are psychological stress that may alter maternal mental health during pregnancy. If the mother is under stress, ito kasabihan yung araw, di ba? Sa mga pagmatanda, sasabihin, oh, huwag ka na masyadong may stress, buntis ka, yung baby mo kawawa naman, you know? But certain toxic experiences like death of a family member, catastrophic disasters, earthquake or a terror attack, chronic stressors, homelessness, poverty, crime, over unemployment, during this gestation period are observed to affect the pregnancy duration and birth weight. These are some of the continuing impact on the brain on a postnatal. When the baby is born, there are certain proximal factors, the factors between the baby and the child, and factors that surround the life of the mother. For example, proximal factors would include the parental caregiving quality. A mother who's not harassed is able to attend to the baby with love, affection, can smile and talk with the baby. This is the start of cognitive and language stimulation. There are some distal factors like what the mother receives as a social support. If she doesn't have to worry about the next meal and not be stressed where the baby will get the milk, then she is able to continue good quality parental caregiving. There are studies that among rodents anyway, that maternal care can counteract prenatal stress, early postnatal handling. These are experiments with animals would show that parental handling, when good, can reverse the effect of trauma. We see this also with human beings. Parental caregiving quality, postnatal moderation for the infant, that HPA is simply the stress management system of the body. Maternal levels of stress has been associated with higher reactivity when maternal sensitivity is low. The infants exposed to high maternal anxiety and distress during pregnancy will have some adverse effects when the baby is born. The association between low birth weight and poorer executive functioning but this can be offset with parental sensitivity when the child is growing up. Sensitivity in positive care for the baby. Early cognitive and linguistic stimulation, like I said earlier, parents talking to the baby, smiling with the baby, toys around the home, reading to the child. These experiences support infant cognitive and social emotional development. Again, while this is happening, that wiring in the brain is happening. Early linguistic stimulation has been significantly associated with brain structures in infants and young children, including neural circuits responsible for language and self-regulation. Postnatal environmental enrichment can reverse the effects of prenatal stress. I think this is the message that we all have to remember. The child is not doomed just because the pregnancy had been toxic. After birth, there is opportunity for positive caregiving, mothering, and this can reverse whatever happened to the brain in utero. Parental social support. This social support to the parent is very important. This will help reduce parental prenatal stress and infant brain development. The social support received by the parent may promote their own mental health and increasing also the parental warmth and sensitivity, and in turn facilitates infant brain development. We can never overemphasize this because this is the way to save a child from disasters of mental health. With low maternal support, if the mother is not receiving any support from the people around her, from the husband, from the in-laws, for example, higher maternal depressive or anxiety symptoms appear. And the pregnancy associated with weaker infant, well, amygdala prefrontal function, that means the structure of the brain, the emotional structure, and the thinking part, the prefrontal function, do not connect well if there's continuing maternal depression and anxiety. There is a typical functional connectivity of emotional regulation circuitry in the infants exposed to high-level stress. However, when the mother receives a good support, receives good support to her mothering, socioeconomic factors like high social economic status, family income, parental education, this will redound to a better mental health for the child. During infancy, the socioeconomic status has been associated with differences in brain development and functional connectivity. This has been associated with good development in the brain, resulting in a good start in life when the child is born. Now, there can be also postnatal stresses, exposure to traumatic events such as child maltreatment, bullying, exposure to disasters like war or violence, or even natural disasters that we are having mostly around us now. This can produce post-traumatic stress symptoms, depression, anxiety, and much later on, problems of substance disorders. Exposure to childhood trauma activates the stress response system. This regulates those neurotransmitters that we have mentioned earlier and can affect the size and functions of the different parts of the brain. Orphanage is sometimes a necessary choice, but rearing in an orphanage is usually associated with diminished autonomic and hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. That simply means the stress management system of the body. So this enlarged amygdala connectivity may cause more stress for the child and difficulties in behavior. Now, adverse childhood events, what we call sometimes as ACE, potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood. There is a high percentage of this, not only in the US, but locally, These are linked, like things like being spanked, being abused, being neglected, sexually or physically abused. These can result in negatively impact on education, job opportunities, learning, and earning possibilities. There is increase of risk of injuries, sexually transmitted diseases, maternal difficulties and problems, including teenage pregnancy. See, these adverse childhood experiences can have very lasting effect, not only to the social, emotional life of the child, growing into a teenager, into an adult, but also in the physical health of the individual. ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, always result in toxic stress. And we know what happens with toxic stress. This is a pyramid that shows the beginning of toxic stress and going upwards into diseases and disability and early death. Now, what about the mental health of the young child who is born now growing up? Changes in the brain architecture in early development lays the foundation for early mental health. Significant mental health problems can and do occur in young children. Young children respond to and process their emotional experiences different from the way adults and older children do. Changes caused by toxic stress increases the likelihood of mental health problems. We know that toxic stress can impair school readiness, academic achievements, both physical and mental health, not only through childhood but throughout the lifespan if no interventions are made. The adolescent, the long-lasting brain development in the prefrontal cortex may also surge in the mental health problems among teenagers. We know that part of being a teenager is a delayed connection between the prefrontal cortex, which regulates what we call our executive functions, thinking ahead, planning, organizing, regulating emotions. There is a uh, long way before the brain, the prefrontal cortex, connects with the emotional brain. This explains why teenagers sometimes struggle, shows many struggles in their behavior, and why they are sometimes, very often, in fact, misunderstood, resulting in problems of mental health. We can respond early. There are limits to the ability of young children to recover from psychological adversity. Even when children have been removed from traumatizing circumstances and placed in exceptionally nurturing home, development improvements are often accompanied by some problems of self-regulation, emotional adaptability in relating to others and to self. However, many children can overcome this when given the opportunity of exceptional care on the part of supportive caregivers, mothers, and other caregivers. The message is the damage is reversible if we are able to provide interventions early on. So, there are policies implied. Early prevention, preventive intervention will be more efficient and produce more favorable remediation later in life. A balanced approach to emotional, social, cognitive, and language development will prepare all children for success in school and later in the workplace and in the community. A supportive relationship, positive learning experiences really begins at home, provided with a range of services that have proven effectiveness. Decreasing toxic stress as early as possible is critical to achieving the best outcome. For children experiencing toxic stress, specialized early childhood interventions are needed. These are some of the strategies in preventing adverse childhood experiences. Strengthen economic support to the families, strengthening household financial security, become family-friendly work policies, promote social norms that protect against violence and adversity, public education campaigns, legislative approaches to reduce corporal punishments. We have a law. I don't know if all Filipinos know that there is a law against corporal punishment. Sometimes a bystander can be very helpful. Men and boys become allies in prevention. They may have gone through difficulties, but when they grow up into young men And some boys who are well reared by their parents can be very helpful to others. Ensure a strong start for children, early childhood, home visitation, high quality childcare, pre-school enrichment with family engagement. Teach skills, social learning, social emotional learning. Teach teenagers safe dating and healthy relationship skills, parenting skills, and family relationships approaches. Connect the youth to caring adults and activities. There are some mentoring programs in schools or some after school programs. Sometimes our schools become so overly focused on academic learning and we forget that mental health is equally important as the things we are learning in school. So that school should be able to provide after school activities that will promote mental health, good mental health for the children. Intervene to lessen immediate and long-term harms. Enhance primary care. There should be victim-centered services. Treatment to lessen the harms of the ACEs. Treatment to prevent problem behavior and involvement in violence. Family-centered treatment for those who are already using substances, chemical substances. In summary, early brain development is influenced by the interaction of the genes and the environment. The genes mobilizes the brain to grow and develop. How that brain will develop, the direction in which the brain will develop is influenced by the environment. It's important to remember it's not just the environment, but the meaning that the child puts on the experience he gets from his environment. The combination of prenatal factors, proximal, distal, postnatal factors affect the brain development and lays the foundation for early and future health. Toxic stress, such as those caused by adverse childhood experiences, can damage the brain and predispose to lifelong mental illnesses. Early prevention and interventions are important in preventing long-term consequences of damage in the brain and in the life of the individual. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cornelio Banaag Jr. Our next speaker also has numerous awards, a Professor Emeritus of the University of the Philippines, and the Most Outstanding Alumna Award of UP in 2005. In the same year, she also received the Gawad Pag-asa Award of the Civil Service Commission in the same year. To discuss Bata Bata, Kamusta Ka? Mental health of the Filipino youth, let us all welcome Dr. Maria Cynthia R. Laines.
Good morning. Topic for this morning is the mental health of the Filipino youth. Objective for this lecture will be to discuss the psychosocial and spiritual influences in the Filipino child's development. Specifically, we will discuss the characteristics of the healthy Filipino child in each developmental stage and the distinct cultural factors that influence or deter their formation. And second, we will discuss the social determinants of mental health in the context of social justice. What is child mental health in the Philippines like? According to the Institute of Mental Health and Metrics, 1 in 8 adolescents ages 10 to 19 and 1 in 17 children ages 5 to 9 are estimated to have a mental disorder. Suicide is the fourth leading cause of death among adolescents 15 to 19. From another source, the Young Adult Fertility and Sexuality Study, which has been tracking Filipinos ages 15 to 24 since 1982 shows that in the recent surveys, the incidence of depression has actually gone up in comparison to that done in 2013. We have traditionally looked at mental health and illness from the biopsychosocial and spiritual dimensions. Today, we want to widen our perspective. So, we look at it in terms of the world of the child and how it influences the mental health, the world around the child, which constitutes the school, peers, and community, online contacts, and the world at large, which actually refers to the social opportunities, poverty, discrimination, conflict, and migration, which affect the child. The explosion of biological findings relating to mental health and illness has heavily shifted attention to biologic factors, with treatment of mental illness emphasizing the biologic approach. A purely biologic approach, however, to mental health and illness does not improve consequences by itself. Common sense tells us that happiness goes beyond the neurons and neurotransmitters. The role of psychosocial factors in mental health and illness continue to be very important and may even be more significant than biologic factors because these factors are easier to change and may be better targets of mental health services. Let us look at studies have shown that the prevalence of depression is higher among women than men. However, is this difference in the prevalence of depression between men and women genetically based? Mental health workers should not overlook the social determinants like the social status of women, the tasks that they do, the privilege that they have, that may actually be contributing to the depression rather than a biologic factor. Previously, we thought that genetic factors were immutable and cast in stone. However, we now know that gene expression can be modified by social interactions and that the presentation and symptoms of psychiatric disorders are influenced by social factors. The world around the child consists of the social influences like the family, the school, the church, the community, society, and government. Physical environment is also included in this, so is government and policy, as all of these form the social determinants of mental health. There are many processes beyond the immediate world of the child, like climate change, armed conflict, migration and displacement, opportunity and discrimination, poverty, and equal access to health service. These, we now know, are important factors in a child's mental health. We have previously looked at child abuse as physical, psychological, sexual, or peer violence. However, if we look at it, there are also a number of children, about 11.8% of children 13 to 17 years old experience collective violence. And this is the kind of violence that the children experience where their homes are destroyed or they're witness or victims of war, and they witness people being shot or bombs exploding, and there is fighting and rioting. Child rearing practices can be seen in two extremes of perspective. No? The first one is the laissez-faire parenting, where the parent does not impose rules or boundaries. Children are not encouraged to make their own decisions and try new things, even if that means failing along the way. It is as if parents are staunch believers of what Lao Tzu says, that life is a series of natural and spontaneous changes, that things flow naturally forward in whatever way they like. The other type of parenting, the other extreme, would be a parenting that is what they call tiger or helicopter parenting, where the parent is always hovering over the child, pressuring the child to set your goals high and do your best. Most of us will have some form of the laissez-faire or the helicopter mom characteristics. We fall kind of in between. No matter what kind of parenting we do, what is important is that we provide the child the basic needs, which are the need for affection, the need for affirmation, appreciation, constancy, discipline, and reasonable demands. In the early stage of life, biologic influence is strong. Many innate capacities define how we relate to the outside world. No? Lucky are the children who are born intelligent or born beautiful, because there's a tendency for adults to interact with them more. Children who are born with some defect in senses, especially vision, may make the distinction between self and the outside world harder to achieve. No? The same way goes for the child with poor immunity or who is sickly, because the stress of being ill may make it more difficult for the child to develop normally. Stella Chess had talked about 9 temperamental traits of infants. All of you who have had children know that from a very young age, even in infancy, each child is different. No? One child may be slow to warm up. One child may be hyperactive or very intense and easily irritable. But all of these determine how they relate to the outside world, and consequently, the outside world relates to them also depending on how their temperament shows. The goal of infancy is to be able to identify a consistent caregiver by whom the infant can experience the world. No? What is needed in this stage is for attachment to form, because this is the basis of how the child sees the world, and it defines future relationships and the personality. To be able to form an attachment and to be able to form a consistent concept of what the outside world is like, child needs to be cared for, to be loved, to be stimulated, to have pleasurable moments with the primary caretaker. You know, basic needs should be met, like breastfeeding and keeping the baby dry. And it's also important to give cognitive and physical stimulation, you know, like touching, hugging, and stimulating the senses. What are the deterrents to achieving attachment in the Philippine context? According to a study by the UP Population Institute, youth who were raised by both parents have slowly declined since 1994. I would surmise that this is because of the movement of parents to either the urban areas or overseas for financial reasons. No? But there are other reasons for absentee parents. No? Some parents, even when present, because of the need to do chores, may not have enough time to attend to their children. No? This is especially true when both parents are working or when there are just too many children to care for. No? Sometimes psychological problems in the parent may also affect the interaction with the child and consequently the attachment that the child forms. No? The best predictor of child-infant attachment is how the parent has experienced his own attachment. No? Meaning to say that a parent repeats the kind of caring that he has experienced. Poverty and environmental factors are deterrents to achieving attachment in the Philippines. No? Programs that teach mothers to stimulate their infants may be effective only if the mothers have the time to interact with the infant. The reality of poverty and the need to work and to other things limit the time that mothers interact with their children. They say quality time is important, but then there is always a limit to quality time. You know? There has to be time. Let's move on to early childhood. No? After the child has attached, okay, the next stage, the child's developmental goal is to develop a sense of separateness. No? Okay. And this sense of separateness can happen only after the child has been confident and about self, no? Like he knows his concept of self, no? And he's able to relate to other people on his own because he already has that sense of separateness, no? Okay, what do parents have to do? One is to encourage independence, allow child to explore on his own. Don't be afraid that the child will get hurt. As they say, you don't get out of childhood without getting hurt. No? Give the child reasonable demands, simple responsibilities that he can do at his age. And usually early childhood, you have the start of discipline and self-control. No? You encourage curiosity and exploration, and you continue stimulating the child in terms of cognition and the senses. In early childhood, you start talking about values, or the child starts having an idea of what's right and wrong. No? So what is important is you model desirable behavior. No? When trying to impart values, it is important to do what you say, no? Okay, so you have to walk the talk, no? Also, at this stage, since the child has a growing sense of awareness of what's going on inside him, no? We must encourage that recognition of feelings and be sensitive to how the other also feels. So this is the start of being self-aware and also being mindful of other people. Many Filipino parents tend to indulge dependence. That is, they help the child instead of letting them try things on their own. Usually, waiting for the child to be able to do something like finishing his food or keeping his toys will need more patience, no? Than doing it yourself, you know. But if you know that it would contribute to the child's development, then you would wait and let the child do what he has to do, you know. Also, discipline in the Western sense has been so closely related to toilet training, no. I've always wondered what that implication is in our culture, no, where the presence of toilets and the limitations of water, sanitation, and hygiene affect a lot of people. No? Does it mean that discipline among Filipinos comes slowly because of the absence of facilities for toilet? No? It may or may not be. No? Okay. Also, in terms of values formation, we as Filipinos tend to reinforce the things that are good for the person. Of course, that's understandable, But early on, teaching pro-social values, having the child be aware of the other person and what is good for majority, doing things right because it is beneficial for society, can be taught very, very early, and should be started early so that the child learns pro-social values earlier. Another peculiarity in terms of achieving autonomy is that we have a concept of a higher being, and many times we try to discipline our children by telling our children, God is going to punish you, and instead of that's not right, it's not the right thing to do. Our introduction to God and spirituality is through a punishment, and somehow that concept of religion and God is brought on to childhood by the child, brought to adulthood, by the child. Late childhood. This is a time when the child is in school. He is with same age peers. He develops friendship. He learns to identify with them. He reinforces his concept of whether he's male or female. Okay. More importantly, he learns to be able to focus. He learns skills. He learns hobbies and widens his interests. What is needed for the parent to encourage positive psychological growth is for the parents to provide supervision and guidance, allow him time to be with his friends, praise his hard work and his perseverance, and also encourage his interests and hobbies by doing it with him or being interested in what he does. What are the deterrents to learning and acquiring skills in the Philippine context? Of course, again, it's poverty. People living inside cement tubes or in the sidewalk will find it difficult to study. But then there are other things related to poverty that affect education: the lack of schools, the overcrowding, the lack of centers to train skills, and centers that emphasize other skills besides math, and encouraging creativity rather than going the usual path of sticking to curriculum. When the child reaches adolescence, this is a time when he has to move away from his parents psychologically. It's also the time when he has to develop healthy male and female relationships, and to continue bonding with friends. This is the time when his critical thinking and assessment of the inside and outside world is emphasized. So what is needed for the parent at this stage is that we have to be sensitive and aware of the adolescent's needs. You have to be available, even if they don't want to talk to you. You have at least be there when they want to talk. You have to listen and understand without being intrusive. You don't have to be asking them all the time how things are with them. but you have to be there when they want to talk, no? They encourage the adolescent to be himself and to give the message that he is okay, he doesn't have to be like his friends, no? And of course, you have to be a parent and not simply a friend, no? You have to act as the adult who will guide him. You have to be a model for him that he wants to be, no? Okay. What are the deterrents to identity in the context of the Philippine society, no? For the achievement of sexual identity, we have socio-religious practices and beliefs that prohibit sexual activity among young people. Health service providers deny access to contraceptives and family planning services to adolescents, which may lead to unwanted pregnancies and a lack of psychological and emotional preparedness. No? There is a great ambivalence, no, including with myself. No? When we talk about the use of contraceptives for adolescents, no, because of our strong religious beliefs, so we feel that adolescents should learn how not to get pregnant without the contraceptives, no? But are we denying the problem? No, because statistics shows that there is a rise of teen fertility from 1997 to 2015, and this is unfortunate because pregnancy in adolescents make it difficult or make the children that they bring up during adolescence at risk for more emotional and psychological problems. No? Another on the side of identity in terms of your vocation, one of the deterrents would be the lack of schools for training, no? The vocational training. We are all focused on getting degrees like doctors, nurses, but actually what we need for our communities are people who are going to go back to their communities and work on the skills that can be used in their area. So all in all, after adolescence, we hope that adolescence is going to be ready for the demands of adulthood and later stages of life. No? Okay, with this, let me close and summarize that we've talked about influence in child's mental health coming from the world within the child, the world around the child, and the world at large. We talked about how these influences occurred in each stage of development, and we talked about the specific Filipino cultural influences in each stage and the factors in the world at large that should be addressed for maximum development. These are my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lainez. Our next speaker is another physician. He is a Medical Officer 3 of the Department of Health, Davao Center for Health Development, the most outstanding postgraduate medical intern in the field of internal medicine and the field of pediatrics from the Davao Medical School Foundation. He has been handling the mental health program of the Davao region, DOH, and has been a speaker for different seminars and trainings regarding mental health. To present Saklolo, May Tulong Ba? Barriers and Resources for Mental Health Needs of the Filipino Youth. Let us all give a warm welcome to Dr. Junel B. Burgos.
Hello, good morning to everyone. Hello again, everyone. Good morning. So this session will be entitled Saklolo, May Tulong Ba? Barriers and Resources for Mental Health Needs of the Filipino Youth. For this session's outline, I will be talking about mental health in a global picture. And then I will try to reiterate the salient points of the WHO Comprehensive Mental Health Action Plan for the Philippines. And then we'll try to go down to the national level and see what are the concepts of mental health in the Philippines. And then we will try to see kung ano po yung mga action, no? What are the actions of the national health sector or our Department of Health on the needs assessment of the WHO Comprehensive Mental Health Action Plan through the National Mental Health Program. And then I will try to talk about the Medicine Access Program for mental health. And also, I will give the initiatives, no, a single slide with regards to the initiatives from the education sector here in Davao region. And of course, no, I will also showcase some of the best practices that we have here in Davao region. Okay, so firstly, WHO was able to coin the term non-communicable disease epidemic. So was said that there are 36 million deaths each year. 38% of the deaths are premature or subclinical, and 6 million deaths from tobacco-related diseases each year, and 1 billion from people with disabilities. Also important to note is that unipolar depression ranks third in global burden of diseases. So in the global picture, globally, mental health has become a development priority. According to the World Health Report in 2001, it has estimated that 1 in 4 people in the world will be affected by mental health or the MS disorders at some point in their lives. Depression would affect an estimated 4.4% of people in the world, and anxiety disorders would affect 3.6% of the population. And a fifth of the global cases would come from the Western Pacific. It's important to note that mental health has been a global priority because in addressing mental health, it is vital to talk about the impact of its disease burden and its implication for individual well-being and societal development. Having a really good mental health program would mean that there should be an increase in the funding, attention, and of course, the integration into the broader development agendas that we have. So in the bigger picture, so how would it fit together? So we actually have 4 risk factors, but it would not be limited to this one only. So we have physical inactivity, we have unhealthy diets, we have tobacco, and of course, harmful use of alcohol. And some of the non-communicable diseases that could stem out from these risk factors would be diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, chronic respiratory diseases, injuries, and of course, your mental disorders, no, or mental health condition. Also important to note that at the World Health Assembly in May 2013, member states adopted 9 voluntary global targets for the prevention of and control of NCDs to be attained by 2025. And we are currently in 2023. So you can try to check all of those circles, but what's important to note is the one where there is drug therapy and counseling, which should be 50% of the coverage of the whole funding for the World Health Organization. So according to the World Health Organization, this should be the mental health needs that we have. All of these are actually important, but what's important to look at here is that 100% should be looked at mental health prevention, protection, and of course, promotion. That is also why it's very important that we are able to do these kinds of events because this also channel and become a conduit of an advocacy, especially for the mental health needs. Okay. So these are the current mental health systems in the low and lower countries. So WHO has seen that there has been an enormous gap between low-income countries and upper middle-income countries. That is a given because Philippines, being a low-income country, would have lesser funding for specific programs that would also include mental health. Another is that mental health systems are providing care to only a small proportion of all of those who needs the care, basically in a clinical approach. And then the move to a community care is slow and uneven. Most of our um most of the care for our service users would go to the facility driven and not really to community. So, of course, mental health resources are also scarce, and mental health resources are inefficiently used. What is important here is that here in the Philippines, I would say, because I have been working in the Department of Health and have been handling the mental health program, I can say that the resources are not that scarce, especially when it comes to psychotropics, because we actually do provision of the psychotropics and augmentation of the psychotropics to our mental health facilities and rural health units. However, I think the mental health resources that this mean is actually the human resource. And I actually have a slide that would explain it further. Another is mental health resources are inequitably distributed. That's a given, especially here in the Philippines because we have geographically isolated and designated areas. Mental health system is not well connected to the other relevant services in the health systems or other sectors. Few mechanisms are also in place to protect the human rights of people with mental disorders. And of course, the participation of care users or the families is weak. So this is the WHO Comprehensive Mental Health Action Plan for the Philippines. It actually has four objectives. The first is to strengthen effective leadership and governance for mental health. Second is to provide comprehensive, integrated, and responsive mental health and social care services in the community-based setting. Third is to implement strategies for promotion and prevention in mental health. And fourth, to strengthen information systems, evidence, and research for mental health. Iisa-isahin po natin yan sila. Okay, so for the core deliverable number one, no, an example of this one would be a national law, no, or a policy that we can have, or the Mental Health Act, and then of course, no, raise public awareness. We can try to identify active champions to do advocacies for us, no, and of course, engage patients and also civil society groups. But what are the drawbacks, no, or the challenges? There is an implementation bottleneck here. There are actually lack or insufficient laws to provide services and protect the human rights of persons with mental health disorders from cruelty, inhumane treatment, torture, and abuse. So what we would like to do is that we would like to constantly tap our legislators and human rights advocates that they must be engaged to develop enlightened laws and policies that reposition mental health in the context of overall healthcare delivery and social development. For the core deliverable number two, we have the phasing out of the long stay psychiatric care service. Second is the strengthening of the community resources and services, providing an outpatient mental health services in all hospitals, if possible, ensure that basic drugs and medicines are accessible and affordable, strengthen capacity for mental health in the primary health care. Okay, so what are some of the implementation bottleneck that we have? So it can have a problem in the lack of the community resources for mental health, including the expansion of the linked networks of health facilities and community resources for a range of mental health needs. One example of this one is that currently in the universal healthcare, it is actually we have what we call the healthcare provider networks. And one of the problems that we currently have is that we still don't know basically where the mental health services should be lodged in the vast healthcare provider networks. No, so should it be in the primary care or should it be in the specialized care? So what we want to we want to tap the local government units, the cities, the municipalities, the provinces, and of course also the districts, or the barangay level, to create opportunities for patients, family members, civil society organizations, advocates, non-governmental organizations, and faith-based groups to provide essential information, feedback, and resources for care and support that complement improvements in treatment, services, and care. For the core deliverable number 3, so develop and implement national mental health promotion plan. So we have to have a strategic planning in the national level. We can partner with the media on the mental health promotion part. And of course, no, very important, integrate suicide prevention into the existing programs and activities that we currently have. So what are the implementation bottlenecks? So disease-oriented and curative care approaches to mental health are necessary, but should be pursued in tandem with the whole of society approaches for promotion of mental health and well-being. We would like to say to educators, social workers, organized groups of artists, athletes, as well as leaders and visionaries in culture and art play, because they will play a crucial role in the social change and mental health promotion. For objective number 4, which is the strengthening the information systems, evidence, and researches for mental health. So we have to establish a baseline from the existing source that we have, develop and implement a plan to include mental health indicators in the National Health Plan. Now, this is very important because the frameworks of our policies, especially those in the LGUs, are actually from baseline data. So how are we able to implement, how are we able to make or um, um, make policies for our service users if we don't have the baseline data that we should need? So some of the implementation bottlenecks that we have is information systems do not include or reflect mental health conditions and their impact on overall mental health outcomes. This is actually true. Currently, in our region, we did not add mental health in the indicators that we usually um, report in our health information systems. So it is actually in a separate data catalog log where we put our patient registries from our rural health units, and it's quite difficult to do because most of it are actually in manual. So what we want to do is that researchers, health systems analysts, national planners, demographers, our stats, our academicians, epidemiologists, should be engaged to systematically generate data to measure progress and impact of interventions through national health and demographic surveys, health information systems, and of course, national health accounts. So an important imperative also that the World Health Organization has been constantly um, um, adding into our advocacy is that preventing suicide. So suicide prevention is an integral part of the mental health action plan. So some of the indicators that the WHO would like to reduce are the percentage reduction of the suicide rate, the number of suicide prevention interventions successfully implemented in our level, and of course, a decrease in the number of hospitalized suicide attempts. So let's go down to the national level. What is the concept of mental health here in the Philippines? So in the Philippines, 3.3% of the population, or 3 million Filipinos, live with depression. And the suicide mortality rate is actually 3.2 out of 100,000 population. And according to the BB School-based Student Health Survey, revealed that 16.8% of students aged 13 to 17 years attempted suicide, and 11.6% seriously considered attempting suicide during the 12 months before the survey. And important to note that 7.1% have actually admitted to having used drugs one or more times during their life. Now, in the Young Adult Fertility and Sexuality Survey, drug use was reported by 7.1% of males and 0.8% of females aged 15 to 24. The mean age at which drug use was initiated is actually 17 years. And also important to note that MNS disorders account for 2 million DALYs, or total numbers of years lost due to illness, disability, or premature death. And depressive disorders and anxiety disorders and epilepsy are the main contributors to healthy years lost. Now, this is what I was actually saying earlier with regards to the mental health resources. It's actually the human resource that we lack here in the Philippines. So important to note that there are 2,051 mental health professionals. This slide is actually quite old. This was a slide I think from 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So I tried to collate again the total number of mental health professionals, pero hindi naman siya ganun kalayo actually from 2051. So um, the 2051 mental health professionals already included the psychiatrists, the child psychiatrists, other medical doctors, nurses, psychologists, social workers, your OTs, your paid workers working in the mental health, working in the government, and also the non-government. So counting these mental health professionals and other health workers that possess some training in healthcare or mental health care, there would be 2.02 mental health workers per 100,000 Filipinos. This means that for every 100,000 Filipinos, there are 0.5 psychiatrists, 0.8 psychologists, 0.3 occupational therapists, and 0.2 speech therapists that are all working in the mental health sector. And actually, some of them are actually not in the mental health sector. Yung iba nga sa kanila, nasa education sector. So, there are 0.001 mental health hospitals, 0.03 mental health units in general hospitals, 0.2 mental health outpatient facilities, 0.002 mental health day treatment facilities, and 0.05 community residential facilities. In some of the general hospitals, they only allot 1 bed and 2.05 in community residential facilities. And there are actually 217 mental health outpatient facilities and 155 inpatient facilities in the whole country. Okay, so just a brief preview on what the WHO was actually asking, especially for the core deliverable number 1. It was asking for a policy. Now, that is where we answered the Mental Health Act or the RA 11036. So, okay. So, I would not further elaborate this more, no? So next is the Global and National Development Support. The provision, it actually supports the provisions of the RA 11036 that was also asked from the WHO Comprehensive Mental Health Action Plan. So lahat po ito are answering to the call of WHO. Next. Sorry po, medyo mahina po kasi yung internet ko kasi I'm currently in training. Sige po. So all right. So this is the answer of the Department of Health, no? So the action framework of the National Mental Health Program. So ayun na nga, no? So prevention and promotion, one of the most important things, information and research, governance, and of course, an enhancement of the services. All of this, in the governed by different models, biopsychosocial model, recovery approach, right-based, and the balanced care. And eventually, we will try to involve a whole of society and the whole of government, and also incorporate all of this into the health systems approach. So the goal of the National Mental Health Program is to promote mental health and well-being, prevent MNS disorders and other forms of addiction, provide care, enhance recovery, and reduce morbidity, disability, and mortality of persons suffering from these disorders, cognizant of their human rights to access quality health care. So these are the objectives for the National Mental Health Program. Hindi ko na po isa-isahin. And these are the components of the National Mental Health Program. So we have wellness of daily living, extreme life events, and of course our MNS or the neurologic, and the substance abuse disorders. Now, these are the training packages for the National Mental Health Program. For the wellness of daily living, you can the training package is the Tulong Alalay at Gabay, which is the health promotion intervention that the National Mental Health Program has. For our extreme life events, there is the MHPSS, or the mental health and psychosocial support, that already includes the psychological first aid for the prevention of the MNS disorders. And of course, for our MNS, so that we are able to capacitate our community level practitioners, we also do the MH-GAP, or the Mental Health Gap Action Program. This is just to augment the number of mental health human resource that we have, because we actually lack it. Now, we also have the Medicine Access Program for mental health. So, di ko na po ito iisa-isahin din, no? But our mental health access program for mental health basically is the augmentation of the Department of Health to our service facilities, no? Na maraming service users and are not able to cater to a lot of service users, especially with the limited funding that they have. So, this is another program that we have in DOH para po ma-augment ang number of psychotropics and provision ng psychotropics natin, especially for those GIDA. Okay, so this is a slide that I got actually from the education sector here, from the regional office 11. This is from the Commission on Higher Education and also from the Department of Education. So there was an alarming increase in the cases of suicide here in Davao region. So we are actually glad that there was an initiative coming from our education sector to have a training, which was the training on the Race Against Suicide, a gatekeeper training for suicide prevention in schools. And that is both for DepEd and also CHED. And these are the number of trainees that we had. So here are just some of the best practices that we have in Davao region. So in 2015, the Davao Center for Development, or the Mental Health Program, facilitated the establishment of a community-based mental health program and implementation of WHO Mental Health Gap Action Program intervention in several municipalities in the region. So ito po yung umpisa actually ng aming National Mental Health Program. Of course, with the increase in the number of trained individuals that we have, there was also an annual increase ranging from 10 to 13% in the number of patients availing mental health services in primary and tertiary care facilities from 2016 to 2019. So in Davao, we have the ongoing schizophrenia project implementation, and also a pilot phase was done to our municipalities. Mainly, we have in Davao Oriental, we have in Davao del Norte, Davao del Sur, and Davao Occidental. And all of them have been identified by DOH-DCHD to have the highest numbers of patients diagnosed with schizophrenia in Davao region. Also, DCHD purchased paliperidone palmitate, which is also needed for the project. And after the 1-year implementation of the pilot phase, healthcare providers were highly satisfied with the project after the initiation of the treatment. And of course, there was demonstrated improvement of the symptoms. So in one of the municipalities in Boston, the municipal health officer conducted a series of lectures on the social dimensions of mental health disorders to the caregivers and families of patients in the project. Those who attended the lectures have expressed an increased understanding on the nature of their patient's condition. And also in Santa Cruz, the RHU provided food, rice and snacks, and fair reimbursement to the families who came during the follow-up checkups. So here are just some of the key outcomes in reframing the mental health agenda. Again, the return for the individual in his all-over well-being, a return for society. Societal impact should be seen on a citizen's total health, family stability, social cohesion, and peace. And of course, for sustainable development, we should be able to have a return for our country. So just a final message from me. We are in the midst of change, reforms, transformation, and the need to reorient so that we can effectively continue to advocate and work together for the implementation of the Mental Health Act and achieve mental health for all Filipinos. In doing so, we need to look for new landscapes, but only to be open to construct our old beliefs acknowledge the initial negativity, paying attention to what's going on in our new reality, where changes are forthcoming, and have new eyes at looking and doing things. So these are my references. And lastly, another cliche, but cliche for a reason, there is no health without mental health. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Burgos. And thank you to all our three speakers for giving us a lot of information to digest. This really is the opening of Ako Para sa Bata 2023. Let me ask all our speakers, Dr. Banaag, Dr. Laines, and Dr. Burgos, to please open their videos and unmute their microphone for us to answer a few questions from our audience. Right. So, early on, we had a lot of questions already from our audience. So let me just read a few of them. Now, the first one, and I think everyone would be very interested to know, how would you strike a balance between disciplining a child so as not to result in depression and the child who grows up not being able to handle adverse consequences in life? So anyone po can answer? Would you like to answer that, Dr. Banaag? Yes po, sir.
I've often been asked, how do we discipline our children now? They seem to be so sensitive. They look like they're so weak, you know, pag pinagalitan mo, gusto na magpakamatay, you know. We have to be aware that we have a new generation of young people. In fairness to these young people, they are the first generation of human beings ever to navigate an environment they never knew before. So we see many differences among these young people. They can be disciplined, they want to be disciplined, but we have to modify our language and tone. Instead, they don't want being told what they should do. Ayaw nila yung itigil mo na yan, hindi umaandar yan, ang tigas ng ulo mo eh. They don't like that, you know. They want to be told, anak, there seems to be a problem. Can we talk about that, you know? Bakit kaya hindi mo nagagawa ito? Is there any way I can help you? In other words, what they want when they're being disciplined is a more empathetic kind of language that will help them listen more and understand. They want to understand why a certain disciplinary action is being imposed on them. They're not like the former generation, my generation, and other subsequent generations. We followed our parents, whether we understood it or not, you know. When they told us to do this, we did that even if we didn't like to. But this generation is different. They have to understand why they have to do something. They also need to be talked with much empathy and not just order. They don't like declarative statements. They like being asked questions. They don't like to be told, ito gawin mo, tama na yan, wag mo nang gawin yan, ito ang sundin mo, ganito. No, they will not do that. I have a patient with ADHD and I simply said, just to give an example, I simply said, you know what, maybe you can do this, you know, ito ang gawin mo, gawa ka ng timeline, gawa ka yung activity mo, anong time mo gagawin, anong time matatapos. You know what this guy said? And he's 17 years old, 18, first year in college. You know what he said? While we were talking, I was thinking about that. Now that you told me to do that, I'm not going to do it. Ganyan ang mga kabataan ngayon. Kung hindi ka magpipigil, masarap batukan, di ba? Kaya hindi na pwede yun. Kailangan
Yes,
mag-usap kayo.
Yeah.
So, ang challenge sa mga parents is to be more creative in imposing discipline.
Yes, sir. Dr. Laines, I think would like to add
Yeah,
a
I would
few.
agree with Dr. Banag, no? A lot has to do with how you say it, no? And when you say something, it has to be explained. And pinaka-basic na, no, never talk in a way that would assault or that would make the the child feel that he is being assaulted, no? So kailangan talaga it's how you say it and you have to explain, no? Kung medyo mainitin ang ulo ng parent, talagang it's a formula for disaster. Hirap, no?
So thank you for that, Dr. Banag and Dr. Lines, no? Another question, I think it's more policy. The question is asking about initiatives from the government to address shortages of mental health professionals, developmental pediatricians in the country, no? If there are programs to address that, Dr. Burgos, no?
Developmental pediatricians po ba, Doc?
And probably mental health professionals
Mental health
as well.
professionals. So, yun na nga, no, because we are actually governed by a lot of societies. And in the level of the Department of Health, what we can actually do only because hindi naman lahat po magkakaroon ng initiative para pumasok into mental health, no? So, the only way that we can do currently is to augment by capacitating those that are already in the field. So, kaya ang ginagawa po namin, tinitrain po namin sila. Kagaya po ng pag-train namin sa Mental Health Gap Action Program so that at least in the level of the RHUs or the communities ay magkaroon na ng intervention for those for those service users that are needing help. So, but with the question of paano madadagdagan, parang hindi po ata parang wala po ata sa kapangyarihan namin. So, I think it will still depend on the initiative of the people kung gusto po nilang pumasok sa mental health or hindi.
Right. Thank you for that, Dr. Burgos. So it's really increasing capacities of
Yes.
non-mental health workers and non-dev leads. Yes, sir. You would like to add?
Dr. Abigail,
Yes, sir.
there's no single professional group that can meet with increasing demand for mental health. The call is for collaborative care. I think we need to hold each other's hand. A good example is what we did in partnership with the PPS, Philippine Pediatric Society. The developmental pediatricians and the child psychiatrist groups worked together, created modules that would enhance the early recognition of mental health problems in the pediatric practice and possibly some early intervention within the capacity of the pediatricians before they call for help from the child psychiatrist. Hindi na pwede yung, ay, depression, tawag kayo ng psychiatrist, eh wala nga psychiatrist eh, paano yun, you know? Or, di ba, dati mga pediatricians, pag meron suicide, that's a no-no, I don't want to touch that, you know? Call a child psychiatrist. Paano kung wala? Papabayaan mo bang magpakamatay, you know? So, in that module, we were able to help pediatricians to understand that they can do certain actions, immediate actions to provide safety. Some pediatricians are now willing and courageous to admit a patient, suicidal patient, under his or her care just to keep a patient in a safe place, that is the hospital. And then calls a friendly child psychiatrist. In Davao, you have Dr. Lagana, always available, you know. So call a friendly child psychiatrist. The child psychiatrist group has a electronic directory that is available in the PSCAP, Philippine Society for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry website, organized according to the regions where they are practicing. So you will know who are the closest child psychiatrists around you, and you can make a phone call. And this is an agreement between us child psychiatrists and pediatricians that we will hold hands, we will provide support for each other. I think this is the only way to go right now. We cannot expect manpower to grow, you know, and not that quick. We all know that there is a pandemic of mental health right now, and WHO recognizes that. And WHO recognizes further that this pandemic of mental health will outlive the COVID virus pandemic. We don't have time to train new people, new soldiers, you know. We have to collaborate. We have to hold hands and provide each other's expertise in trying to face up to the increasing demand for mental health services.
Right. Thank you for that, Dr. Banaag. So, and Dr. Burgos. So, for the last question, I see that there are a lot of questions from our audience. We really appreciate that you're participating in our webinar. If you'd be attending the next webinars, I'm sure we can accommodate your questions then. But for the last question po, no, this is for Dr. Laines. There are a lot of statements here about children witnessing violence in the streets or living in the streets, experiencing neglect. No, how do we help? No, in terms of improving their resilience, Dr. Laines?
Oh, I think you have to, of course, you have to process the event with the child, no? And there has to be a time for that. No, sometimes they don't open up like right away, but when they're ready, then you should talk about it. Some children will just manifest behavior that indicates some problems. No, just like in other forms of child abuse, yung trying to master the trauma of the event. No, there is a need for repetition. No, so when you see that, then you pick it up and try to process it with the child. Now, hopefully, the child opens up to you. No, otherwise, you need to also you might need to refer to a specialist. No, but you should also provide the child with other activities so that may be supportive at this time. No, but you have to be around them to support. No?
So, thank you very much for our very live, informative discussion. Thank you to our experts, Dr. Cornelio Banaag Jr., Dr. Cynthia Laines, and Dr. Junel Burgos, for being with us this morning. Let's have our self-care activity. Everyone, please watch this very short video prepared by our psychiatry residents in SPMC IPBM, Dr. Stating and Daog Daog. So, please turn your attention to the video.
Hello and welcome. We will be exploring a simple yet effective technique for managing stress and anxiety, the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. This technique can help you reconnect with the present moment and find calmness in stressful situations. Let's get started. First, find a quiet and comfortable space where you can sit or stand. It's important to create an environment free from distractions. Take a deep breath in through your nose and exhale slowly through your mouth. Let go of any tension as you breathe out. Now, let's engage your senses using the 5-4-3-2-1 method. Look around and name 5 things you can see. These can be everyday objects or details in your environment. Next, name 4 things you can touch. Pay attention to the textures and sensations. Listen closely and name 3 things you can hear. It could be the sound of your surroundings or even your own breathing. If possible, name 2 things you can smell. It can be your clean clothes or the perfume you are wearing. Finally, name 1 thing you can taste. You can take a sip of water or simply notice the taste in your mouth. Congratulations! You've completed the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. This simple exercise can help you regain a sense of control and calmness when you're feeling overwhelmed. Practice it whenever you need to center yourself in the present moment. Take care and remember, you have the power to find peace within.
Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye and have a pleasant afternoon.